Hello, everyone. She was the face of perfection. Porcelain skin, sea green eyes, a smile that lit up magazine covers across the world. At 19, Paulina Porizkova became the first woman from Eastern Europe to appear on the cover of Sports Illustrated. She was not just a model. She was the symbol of impossible beauty, calm, poised, untouchable. But behind that stillness was a refugee, a child once left behind the Iron Curtain, a teenager torn between two cultures, a woman who smiled for the cameras while hiding abandonment, betrayal, and years of silence. And when the industry decided she had aged out, she did not disappear. She got louder, more honest, more dangerous. This is the story of the supermodel who became too smart for fashion, too outspoken for fame, and too real for the world that once adored her. Paulina Porizkova was born in 1965 in Prostějov, Czechoslovakia, behind the Iron Curtain, where beauty was not a path to freedom, but a mask worn for survival. Her parents were young intellectuals who defied the regime. When Paulina was just 3, her mother and father fled to Sweden in search of political asylum, leaving their daughter behind. The plan was to bring her later, but the regime had other ideas. For years, Paulina was raised by her grandmother, under constant surveillance by the communist authorities. She did not know when or if her parents would return. When her mother finally came back for her, the government accused her of kidnapping her own child. Paulina became a pawn in a political standoff. Headlines in Sweden called her the lost girl of Czechoslovakia. She was 5 years old. Eventually, after intense international pressure, Paulina was allowed to join her parents in Sweden. But the reunion was not the fairy tale she imagined. Her father soon left the family. Her mother, struggling with her own trauma, became emotionally distant. Paulina grew up in a small apartment, surrounded by books, resentment, and unspoken pain. She was an outsider in every way, too Czech for Sweden, too poor for privilege, too quiet for rebellion. But there was something in her face, in her posture, that caught attention. At 13, she was scouted by a friend who needed a model for a makeup school. At first, Paulina thought it was a joke. She had never seen herself as beautiful. She had never been taught to feel seen. But the camera saw her differently. It captured a strange mix of sadness and poise, a girl who looked like she belonged to no one. That early photo would circulate quietly in modeling circles, until it landed in the hands of someone who would change her life. Behind her elegance was exile. Behind her symmetry, loss. She was not just beautiful, she was displaced. And that gave her a kind of magnetism that no training could fake. Paulina never asked to be admired. She grew up not knowing how. But in that absence of vanity, the world found something rare, a face that looked like silence, but spoke volumes. She was not supposed to be there. At barely 15, Paulina Porizkova found herself on a plane to Paris, armed with a borrowed coat, a passport full of stamps, and a face the industry could not ignore. Her mother had resisted. Modeling, she said, was not a real life. But Paulina needed money. And more than that, she needed space to become someone beyond the child of broken countries and broken promises. Paris was cold, unfamiliar, and cruel. In the beginning, the agencies rejected her. Too young and too raw, too Eastern European. She had no connections, no real portfolio. But she had something else, a face that made silence feel cinematic. Photographers noticed, slowly, quietly, but then all at once. At 16, she booked a shoot with French Elle. The images were stunning, not glamorous, but haunting. She looked like someone who remembered something you had forgotten. That editorial changed everything. She was suddenly not just a girl from Czechoslovakia. She was a muse. Offers flooded in. Her look, once seen as too severe, became the new ideal. She was booked across Europe and soon New York. But Paulina was not swept away. She watched everything. She learned quickly. She understood that beauty, in fashion, was currency and that it could be spent recklessly if you did not control the terms. Her breakthrough came with Sports Illustrated. At 18, she became one of the youngest women ever to grace its cover. But even then, she felt the tension. They saw her as a swimsuit model. She saw herself as something more. She was intelligent, politically aware, fluent in multiple languages. But those were not things the industry asked for. They wanted her to smile, pose, vanish. She did the opposite. Behind the scenes, Paulina was already pushing back. She questioned contracts. She demanded fair pay. She read her agreements. She refused nudity if it felt exploitative. And when photographers tried to mold her into cliches, she stared back not with rebellion, but with calm refusal. She did not arrive in fashion to please. She arrived to survive, to take what she needed and leave with her dignity intact. Modeling was never her dream, but it became her battlefield. And with every frame, every catwalk, every negotiation, Paulina Porizkova turned the fantasy into a place where she, the immigrant, the exile, the girl once abandoned, could finally exist on her own terms. By the time Paulina Porizkova turned 19, she was everywhere. On the covers of Vogue, Elle, and Harper's Bazaar, in campaigns for Estée Lauder and Calvin Klein. Her face, symmetrical, icy, intelligent, had become a global obsession. But Paulina was not just another pretty girl on the cover. She was the first woman from a communist country to break into Western modeling at this level. And she did it not by adapting, but by holding her ground. Her breakthrough was not just about beauty, it was about timing. In the 1980s, the world was fascinated by contradictions, soft power and Cold War, sex and sophistication. Paulina embodied that paradox. She looked like a painting, but she thought like a strategist. Her eyes never begged. They challenged. Photographers adored her. Richard Avedon called her expression controlled defiance. Peter Lindbergh captured her in black and white, draped in wind and shadow, making her look like a story that had no beginning or end. Designers fought for her. She could do high fashion and commercial work, but always on her terms. And in a sea of smiles, she gave the camera restraint. At the height of her fame, Estée Lauder signed her to a historic multi-million-dollar contract, the highest ever for a model at that time. But even then, she knew how fleeting it all could be. In interviews, she spoke openly about the industry's obsession with youth and silence. She said, "They want your image, but not your voice." Still, she gave them both. She walked the biggest runways, graced hundreds of covers, and became one of the most recognizable faces in fashion. But Paulina never chased celebrity. She did not build a brand around her name. She built boundaries. While other supermodels embraced fame's chaos, Paulina kept a distance, observing, calculating, protecting herself from the machine that had made her. And then, at her peak, she made another unexpected move. She married Rick Ocasek, the frontman of the Cars, a rock star twice her age, quiet, cerebral, and as unconventional as she was. It shocked the tabloids. But Paulina never cared for their approval. She had conquered the industry that once saw her as an outsider. And yet, even in triumph, she knew it would not last. Beauty fades, fame fades faster. But self-respect, that was the one thing she had learned to hold tight. Paulina Porizkova had become untouchable, not because of her looks, but because she never forgot where she came from, and she never pretended to be anyone else. Paulina Porizkova was never loud, but she was always firm. In an industry built on control of image, of youth, of silence. Her greatest act of rebellion was refusing to disappear quietly. She aged, and then she spoke. In her prime, Paulina had already started to question the system. She asked why older models were erased. She challenged the idea that a woman's power was tied to how little she said and how much she revealed. She demanded better contracts. She demanded to be heard. But true rebellion came later, not in youth, but in aging. When the industry stopped calling, she did not fade into privacy. Instead, she turned her own body into protest. She began posting unretouched photos of herself in her 50s, lines, folds, gray hair included. She spoke about the loneliness of invisibility, about being told she was too old to be loved, even by people she had once trusted. And it hit harder because she had once been the image of perfection. In 2019, her husband of over 3 decades, Rick Ocasek, passed away. They had been separated but were still close. She had cared for him during his final illness. And then came the shock. He had written her out of his will. No explanation, no warning. The woman who had once graced 1,000 covers was left not only grieving but financially abandoned. She did not stay silent. Paulina turned her pain into testimony. In interviews, essays, social media, she opened up not with bitterness, but with brutal honesty. She talked about loss, about being discarded by love, by youth, by society. And women listened, because she was not just speaking for herself. She was speaking for all the women who had been told they were expired. She called out the modeling world, the way it rewards beauty, but punishes reality. She said, "If I post a photo of myself crying, people applaud my courage. If I post a photo of myself in lingerie, they say I am desperate. I am the same person in both." Paulina refused to choose between dignity and desire. She wanted both. She claimed both. Her rebellion was not in burning it all down. It was in surviving the burn, in staying visible, in aging out loud, in showing the world that being forgotten is not the end, it is the beginning of saying everything you were once too polite to say. The fall did not come with scandal. It came with silence. After dominating the fashion world for over a decade, Paulina Porizkova began to vanish from the spotlight, not because she wanted to, but because the industry had decided her time was up. It was the kind of erasure that does not make headlines. No public dismissal, no explosive tabloid feud. Just fewer phone calls, fewer shoots, less relevance. She had entered her 30s still radiant, still articulate, but already marked as past her prime. For a time, she accepted it. She focused on family, on motherhood, on a quieter life alongside Rick Ocasek, the musician who saw her intellect as clearly as her face. They were not a traditional couple. He was reclusive, eccentric. She was curious, open. But it worked, until it didn't. Their marriage began to erode not with fury, but with distance. By the late 2010s, they had separated. Still, Paulina remained by his side when he became ill. She cared for him, kept the household intact, made peace with the quiet sadness of a love that had transformed into something gentler. Then came September 2019. Rick died in their shared home, and Paulina found him. The shock was compounded by a legal blow. His will had been updated shortly before his death. Paulina was written out completely, no inheritance, no explanation, not even a kind farewell in ink. The man she had loved and raised a family with had chosen to leave her with nothing, not even closure. Suddenly, she was in mourning and bankrupt. She had no access to accounts, no income. The world that had once adored her now watched with detached interest. She was no longer the supermodel. She was the abandoned wife. But even then, Paulina did not collapse. She grieved, publicly and privately. She shared her tears. She wrote through her anger. She did not try to pretend it was noble. She admitted she was humiliated. She admitted she was lost. And in doing so, she gave voice to an entire generation of women who had been quietly discarded by husbands, by employers, by time itself. Her fall was not a failure. It was a reckoning, a moment when everything was stripped away, and what remained was not a cover girl, but a woman who refused to be erased. Paulina Porizkova never asked to become a symbol, but now she is one not of perfection, but of persistence. She outlived the fantasy, she outlasted the silence, and she turned her pain into a kind of beauty the camera was never trained to capture. Today, she speaks not as a model, but as a mirror. Her essays go viral. Her Instagram posts spark debate. She poses in lingerie at 58 not for validation, but for reclamation. She is aging publicly, imperfectly, unapologetically. And in doing so, she is offering a different kind of role model. Younger women call her brave. Older women call her necessary. She is not here to inspire. She is here to insist on presence, on dignity, on the right to still be seen when the industry turns away. She was once the face of flawless youth. Now, she is the voice of earned wisdom. Paulina has said, "I was valuable when I was silent and beautiful. Now that I speak, they want me to sit down." But she will not. Her legacy is not a single photo. It is not a magazine cover. It is the accumulation of choices to stay visible, to stay honest, to turn every ending into another opening line. So maybe this is the real question. What if the most powerful thing a woman can be is unafraid to change?